When a narcissist doesn't get sexual access, they don't just feel rejected, they feel destabilized, exposed, and humiliated. And what follows is not longing, it's retaliation. Because sex to a narcissist is not about closeness, it's about energy extraction. And when that energy stops flowing, the behaviors that emerge are often disturbing, revealing, and deeply telling. If you've experienced this shift, that sudden coldness, aggression, or sexual hostility when you asserted autonomy, pause here, ground yourself. And if this resonates, engage with this conversation, because recognizing the pattern is how you stop internalizing the blame. For a narcissistic personality, sex is not an expression of intimacy, mutual desire, or emotional bonding. It functions as a regulatory tool. Intimacy requires vulnerability, reciprocity, and emotional presence, all of which threaten the narcissist's fragile inner structure. What replaces intimacy is performance and extraction. Sexual attention becomes a way to stabilize their self-image, to confirm desirability, power, and relevance in the moment. It is less about connection with another person and more about soothing an internal void that never stays filled for long. Sex serves as proof that they matter, that they are wanted, chosen, and superior. It temporarily silences underlying shame, insecurity, and feelings of inadequacy. This is why the act itself is often disconnected from empathy or emotional attunement. The partner's experience is secondary to the narcissist's need to feel affirmed. When sexual attention is present, the narcissist feels regulated, calmer, more confident, sometimes even generous. When it is absent, the regulation collapses. Because sex is used as validation, it becomes transactional rather than relational. The narcissist may unconsciously equate sexual access with loyalty, obedience, or worth. Boundaries are perceived as rejection, not autonomy. A partner saying no is not heard as self-protection or personal choice, but as an attack on the narcissist's identity. This is why sexual refusal often triggers disproportionate reactions such as rage, withdrawal, contempt, or punishment. Sex also reinforces control. Being sexually desired confirms dominance and relevance, especially when the narcissist ties their value to conquest or desirability. Losing that access feels like losing power, rather than reflecting on why intimacy might feel unsafe or why a partner may not feel emotionally secure. The narcissist externalizes blame. They may accuse the other person of being cold, withholding, manipulative, or broken. This dynamic explains why sex with a narcissist can feel empty, performative, or disconnected even when frequent. The focus is not on shared closeness, but on what is being extracted. Sexual energy becomes fuel, not bonding. And because fuel is always consumed, never integrated, the hunger returns quickly, demanding repetition, escalation, or replacement, driven by regulation needs rather than genuine desire. Sexual supply operates as emotional fuel for the narcissistic personality because it temporarily stabilizes an otherwise unstable inner world. Beneath the surface, confidence and entitlement sits chronic emptiness, insecurity, and a poorly developed ability to self-soothe. Sexual attention acts as a fast-acting regulator. It provides immediate reassurance of worth, desirability, and control without requiring emotional labor or introspection. This is why sexual validation is often pursued compulsively rather than organically. When this fuel is available, the narcissist may appear calmer, more attentive, even charming. The nervous system is soothed by the confirmation that they are still wanted and still powerful. But this regulation is external and fragile. It depends entirely on another person's availability and compliance. There is no internal reservoir to draw from when sexual supply is reduced or removed. As a result, deprivation does not register as disappointment, but as destabilization. Without sexual supply, dysregulation sets in quickly. Emotional volatility increases. Irritability, agitation, and impulsivity rise because the usual mechanism for soothing shame and anxiety is no longer accessible. The narcissist may experience this as restlessness, resentment, or a sense of being wronged without consciously recognizing the deeper emotional collapse underneath. They do not identify the feeling as dysregulation. They experience it as provocation. Because self-regulation skills are underdeveloped, the narcissist seeks to restore balance through external means. This can look like obsessing over sexual attention elsewhere, escalating demands, or engaging in behaviors that reassert dominance. The urgency is not about desire, but about restoring equilibrium. Sexual deprivation exposes their dependence, and that exposure itself is intolerable. This dysregulation often spills outward. The narcissist may project discomfort onto their partner, accusing them of being withholding, manipulative, or unloving. Anger becomes a substitute regulator. Contempt becomes a defense against vulnerability. In some cases, withdrawal or emotional shutdown replaces rage, but the function is the same: to avoid feeling powerless. What is critical to understand is that this reaction is not driven by unmet sexual needs in a healthy sense. It is driven by the collapse of a coping mechanism. Sexual supply was never about mutual pleasure or closeness. It was emotional anesthesia. When it is gone, the untreated wound underneath becomes active, raw, and dysregulating, and the narcissist will move quickly to numb it again through whatever means are available. When sexual access is framed through entitlement, deprivation is experienced not as a neutral boundary, but as a personal injustice. Narcissistic personalities often carry an unconscious belief that admiration, attention, and access to another person's body are owed to them as confirmation of their value. This belief is rarely articulated outright, but it governs expectations. Sex becomes something they deserve rather than something mutually chosen. When that expectation is disrupted, entitlement does not soften into understanding. It hardens into resentment. Resentment emerges because entitlement clashes with reality. The narcissist believes they have earned access through status, effort, charm, or past investment. A partner's autonomy contradicts that belief. Instead of recognizing the other person as separate, with their own internal world and limits, the narcissist interprets refusal as disrespect or betrayal. The emotional response is not sadness or curiosity, but indignation. How dare you deny me what I am owed? This resentment is often quiet at first. It may show up as subtle coldness, irritation, or passive-aggressive remarks. The narcissist may keep score internally, mentally cataloging perceived slights and injustices. Over time, this resentment corrodes any remaining empathy. The partner is no longer seen as a person with needs, but as an obstacle to gratification. Sexual frustration becomes moralized. The narcissist reframes themselves as the victim and the other person as cruel, withholding, or defective. Because narcissistic shame is intolerable, resentment acts as a protective shield. Feeling wronged is easier than feeling unwanted. Anger feels more powerful than vulnerability. Resentment allows the narcissist to avoid confronting the painful truth that desire cannot be coerced and intimacy cannot be demanded. It also justifies punishment. Once resentment sets in, behaviors meant to regain control or assert dominance feel rational to them. This dynamic explains why sexual boundaries often trigger disproportionate reactions. The issue is not the absence of sex, but the collapse of entitlement. What follows is an emotional pivot from wanting to punishing, from desire to devaluation. Resentment becomes the bridge between unmet expectation and retaliatory behavior, preserving the narcissist's sense of superiority while eroding the relational bond in the process. When sexual frustration arises, a narcissistic personality does not turn inward to examine feelings, patterns, or relational dynamics. Self-reflection requires accountability and tolerance for discomfort, both of which threaten the narcissist's fragile self-concept. Instead, frustration is immediately externalized. The emotional tension created by unmet sexual supply is projected outward and assigned to someone else. The problem is never internal dysregulation or entitlement. The problem is always another person's behavior. Externalization protects the narcissist from shame. Acknowledging sexual frustration as an internal state would require admitting dependency, vulnerability, or need. That admission feels dangerous, so the mind redirects the discomfort into blame. The partner becomes the cause of the pain. They are labeled cold, prudish, manipulative, selfish, or intentionally withholding. This narrative allows the narcissist to preserve the illusion of superiority while disowning emotional responsibility. This process often includes rewriting reality. Boundaries are reframed as punishments. Consent is reframed as control. A partner's exhaustion, stress, or emotional withdrawal is interpreted not as context but as a personal attack. The narcissist may insist that their frustration is justified, even inevitable, because someone else failed them. This reinforces a sense of moral high ground while avoiding any examination of how their own behavior may have eroded safety, trust, or desire. Externalization also fuels escalation. Because the narcissist believes the discomfort originates outside of them, they attempt to fix it externally. They may pressure, guilt, sulk, provoke jealousy, or seek validation elsewhere. These actions are not attempts to repair intimacy. They are attempts to discharge emotional tension without sitting with it. The goal is relief, not understanding. This pattern blocks growth. Without self-reflection, there is no learning, no curiosity about the relational impact of their actions, no recognition that desire is influenced by emotional safety. Instead, the narcissist doubles down on entitlement. Each act of externalization reinforces the belief that their needs should be met without negotiation, and that frustration is proof of mistreatment rather than a signal for introspection. Over time, this dynamic trains partners to walk on eggshells, anticipating blame whenever autonomy is asserted. The narcissist's refusal to own internal states turns normal relational fluctuations into power struggles, where frustration is weaponized and responsibility is perpetually displaced outward. When sexual supply is reduced or withdrawn, many narcissistic personalities respond with covert punishment rather than direct communication. Overt confrontation would risk exposure, rejection, or loss of control, so the response becomes indirect, deniable, and psychologically corrosive. These punishment behaviors are designed to restore dominance while avoiding accountability. They are subtle enough to confuse the partner, yet powerful enough to induce guilt, anxiety, or self-doubt. One common tactic is emotional withdrawal. The narcissist becomes cold, distant, or unresponsive, creating an atmosphere of tension and insecurity. This silence is not about self-regulation or space. It is a calculated removal of warmth meant to signal displeasure. The partner is left to wonder what they did wrong, often feeling compelled to repair the rupture by sacrificing their own boundaries. Affection becomes conditional, reinstated only when compliance returns. Another form of covert punishment is devaluation. The narcissist may begin making cutting remarks about attractiveness, desirability, or worth, often framed as jokes or honesty. These comments are meant to destabilize the partner's self-esteem and reassert superiority. If sexual access is no longer guaranteed, the narcissist attempts to reduce the partner's sense of agency by undermining their confidence. Triangulation is also common. The narcissist may hint at interest from others, exaggerate desirability, or subtly compare the partner to real or imagined rivals. This is not about moving on. It is about provoking jealousy and fear of replacement. The underlying message is that sexual access is a privilege that can be revoked in return. Passive-aggressive behaviors often escalate during this phase. Missed plans, intentional neglect, withholding reassurance, or sudden moral superiority can all function as punishment. The narcissist may portray themselves as wounded or mistreated, forcing the partner into a caretaking role while obscuring the original boundary that triggered the response. These behaviors serve a single function: to coerce restoration of control without openly acknowledging entitlement. The narcissist avoids direct negotiation because negotiation implies equality. Covert punishment preserves dominance while allowing plausible deniability. The partner is left managing emotional fallout, questioning their perceptions, and often re-engaging sexually not out of desire, but to stop the punishment cycle, reinforcing the dynamic without ever resolving it. At the core of sexual entitlement in narcissistic personalities lies unprocessed shame rather than authentic desire. This shame is often unconscious, formed early, and tied to feelings of inadequacy, defectiveness, or emotional invisibility. Instead of being integrated, it is buried beneath a grandiose or entitled exterior. Sexual access becomes a way to override this shame, to momentarily feel powerful, chosen, and immune to rejection. Desire is not the driver. Avoidance of shame is. Entitlement acts as armor. By believing they are owed sexual attention, the narcissist never has to risk vulnerability or face the possibility of being unwanted. The logic is internal and rigid. If access is guaranteed, shame stays dormant. When a partner expresses autonomy or lack of desire, it punctures that armor. The resulting emotional reaction is not simple disappointment, it is exposure. The narcissist is suddenly confronted with the very feeling they have spent a lifetime avoiding, not being enough. Because shame is intolerable, it is immediately defended against. Entitlement flips into anger, contempt, or moral superiority. Rather than acknowledging hurt or insecurity, the narcissist reframes the situation as injustice. They are not ashamed, they are wronged. This psychological maneuver preserves the false self while displacing the pain outward. The partner becomes the problem, the boundary becomes cruelty, and the narcissist's internal collapse is rewritten as righteous indignation. This is why sexual rejection can provoke such disproportionate responses. It is not about libido mismatch or relational conflict. It is about shame activation. The absence of sexual supply strips away a key defense mechanism, leaving the narcissist face to face with feelings they cannot regulate or tolerate. Instead of sitting with that discomfort, they attack, withdraw, devalue, or seek replacement validation to quickly reseal the wound. Understanding this dynamic clarifies why negotiations around sex with a narcissist rarely lead to empathy or compromise. Requests for emotional safety or mutuality are experienced as threats, not invitations. Shame does not soften into vulnerability. It hardens into entitlement because entitlement feels stronger than exposure. What looks like excessive sexual demand is actually an attempt to outrun shame, using access and control as proof that the wound underneath does not exist, even as it quietly governs every reaction. When sexual access is lost, it does not merely frustrate a narcissistic personality. It threatens the structure of the false self they rely on to function. The false self is a carefully constructed identity built on dominance, desirability, superiority, and control. Sexual attention reinforces this identity by confirming power and relevance. Being wanted affirms the image they project. Losing that access destabilizes the illusion and exposes how dependent it truly is on external validation. Sexual desirability is often fused with power in the narcissistic psyche. To be desired is to be in control. It means influence over another person's attention, body, and emotional investment. When that influence disappears, the narcissist experiences a symbolic loss of status. It feels like demotion. The false self, which cannot tolerate weakness or uncertainty, reacts as if its survival is at stake. This is why the response can seem extreme or irrational. The narcissist is not reacting to a single boundary, but to a perceived collapse of authority. Without sexual access, they may feel irrelevant, diminished, or invisible. These feelings are intolerable because the true self underneath is underdeveloped and fragile. Rather than sitting with that vulnerability, the narcissist attempts to reassert power as quickly as possible. This often takes the form of dominance behaviors. Control may shift into other areas such as emotional manipulation, financial leverage, intimidation, or moral superiority. The goal is not intimacy, but restoration of hierarchy. If sexual access no longer confirms power, something else must. The narcissist cannot exist in a relational space where influence is equal and consent is honored. Loss of sexual supply also challenges the narcissist's narrative about themselves. They often believe they are irresistible, exceptional, or entitled to admiration. Sexual refusal contradicts that story. Instead of updating the narrative, the narcissist attacks the source of contradiction. The partner is devalued, blamed, or erased in order to protect the fantasy of superiority. What makes this dynamic particularly damaging is that the narcissist experiences power as safety. Equality feels dangerous. Mutuality feels destabilizing. Sexual access reassures them that they are still in control of the relational field. When it is gone, panic is masked as anger, entitlement is masked as need, and dominance is used to patch the cracks in the false self before the emptiness underneath becomes visible. When sexual behavior is driven by dominance rather than connection, the goal is not mutual pleasure, closeness, or emotional resonance. It is about positioning. The narcissistic personality uses sexuality as a way to establish hierarchy, to determine who holds power and who is subordinate. Desire becomes a tool, not a shared experience. What matters is not how both people feel, but who is in control of access, initiation, and validation. Connection requires attunement. It requires curiosity about another person's internal world and responsiveness to their boundaries. Dominance bypasses all of that. In dominance-based sexual dynamics, the narcissist remains psychologically separate. The other person is not experienced as a full subject, but as an object that reflects worth, desirability, or authority. This is why sex can feel one-sided, scripted, or emotionally empty, even when it is frequent. The narcissist is present in body but absent in empathy. When sexual access is threatened or withdrawn, the narcissist does not respond with concern for the relationship. They respond as if their position has been challenged. The behavior that follows is aimed at restoring superiority, not rebuilding trust. Pressure, coercion, withdrawal of affection, jealousy induction, or moral shaming all serve to reassert dominance. These behaviors are often misread as insecurity or high libido, but their function is control. Because dominance is the organizing principle, consent is tolerated only when it aligns with the narcissist's desires. Autonomy is experienced as defiance. A partner's changing needs or emotional distance is not met with dialogue but with strategy. The narcissist seeks leverage rather than understanding. Sexuality becomes a battleground where power is negotiated implicitly through compliance and withdrawal. This framework explains why emotional safety often deteriorates over time. As dominance replaces connection, the relational space becomes unsafe for vulnerability. The partner learns that closeness is conditional and that desire is monitored. The narcissist may alternate between sexual pursuit and cold disengagement, not as expressions of passion or hurt, but as maneuvers to regain control of the dynamic. What is missing in all of this is reciprocity. Connection would require the narcissist to tolerate equality, to accept that desire fluctuates, and to remain present without guaranteed validation. Dominance avoids that risk entirely. It reduces sex to a confirmation of rank, a way to measure influence, and a mechanism to quiet internal instability by ensuring that someone else is positioned beneath them, leaving no room for genuine intimacy, only control disguised as desire.